Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining me. I'm Israeli government spokesperson Raquela Karamson, and today is April 4th, day 181 of the October 7th war. 181 days on, our unwavering objectives remain. Number 1, bring our hostages home to their families. Number 2, bring the perpetrators of this horrific massacre to justice by achieving total victory. And number 3, ensure that Hamas has no refuge in Gaza and will never again be able to attack us from Gaza. 181 days into this war, 59,800 of our civilians from the south and over 60,000 of our civilians from the north remain displaced. We are committed to restoring security to the borders of our nation so that these families can safely return to their homes. Now to the latest on the tragic World Central Kitchen incident. Israel views these deaths as painfully tragic. Our president, the prime minister, the minister of defense, and the IDF chief of staff have expressed their sorrow and condolences. Additionally, I would refer you to the apology made by the chief of staff yesterday, together with the apology made by the president in his phone call to the founder of the WCK. Initial investigation results have already been shared by the Chief of Staff, and they indicate that it was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night in very complex war conditions. But we are conducting a thorough and transparent examination of this case through the fact-finding assessment mechanism, an independent expert body. In the coming weeks, as the findings become clear, we will be transparent and share the results with the public. I want to reiterate that the World Central Kitchen employees play a critical role in providing food to those in need. Genuine aid workers are often the unsung heroes in conflicts. Now, despite the tragic incident this week, a steady flow of humanitarian aid continues to be inspected and transferred to Gaza. In the last 24 hours, 217 aid trucks were transferred to Gaza. 179 food packages carrying over 150,000 meals were airdropped over northern Gaza, and 30 food trucks entered northern Gaza. This ongoing effort in coordination with the U.S. and our partner countries ensures the maximum aid reaches the residents that need it the most. Turning now to our hostages. The government and the people of Israel stand in solidarity with our hostages and their families, keeping them in our hearts and our minds daily. Our hostages are an open wound here in Israeli society, and we will not rest till they are back home with their families and Hamas's terror army has been brought to justice. Destroying Hamas and securing the release of our hostages are not mutually exclusive, but rather interconnected objectives. As the Chief of Staff of the IDF made clear yesterday, securing the release of our hostages is our top priority, and I quote, "We are pressing to initiate movement in the negotiations to bring about an agreement for the release of the hostages. This is our top priority," end quote. It will only be achieved through strong pressure, and we will press as much as necessary against Hamas's terror army and at the negotiating table until we secure the release of our remaining citizens. Hamas is currently holding hostages from 23 different countries. These are not just our citizens, these are your citizens. We urge all civilized nations and those globally concerned with the grave situation here on the ground to advocate for the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages and the surrender of the remainder of Hamas's terror army. Now on Iran, the Prime Minister recently told U.S. Congresspeople who were visiting that Iran's formal policy has shifted from ideological to practical. Iran seeks the destruction of the State of Israel. And over the last 6 months, Iran has been actively working to destabilize the region. The State of Israel is prepared for every scenario. We will respond with force to any attempts to attack us. No one should be in any doubt that in the strategic Middle Eastern power balance, Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis are indeed agents of chaos. Iran is pitched against Israel and all moderate countries that want stability. That brings us to the end of today's briefing. I will now take your questions in the chat. Please do remember to state your news outlet with your question. Thank you.
Thank you. First question from David Clement from the News Forum in Canada. Poland's president has said that Israel should compensate the families of the aid workers who were killed. Can the Prime Minister's office comment on the possibility of compensation for the families of those killed, including Canadian Jacob Flickinger?
Thank you for the question. I've seen those reports, and I will say that this incident, as I said in the briefing, is painfully tragic. And all the members of our cabinet, war cabinet, and the government have expressed their sorrow and condolences. And we were moving ahead with the investigation, and when the results become available, we will make them public. Regarding, compensation, I have nothing to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question from Joel Pollock at Breitbart News. Israel has been talking about entering Rafah for nearly 2 months, since mid-February. Is the humanitarian cost of the delay greater than the humanitarian cost that would have been if Israel had entered Rafah right away and ended the war with victory?
Thank you for the question. As the Prime Minister has stated, entering Rafah will be the completion of our war against Hamas. We must enter Rafah in order to destroy the remaining battalions of Hamas's terror army. And, as Minister Gantz said, you can't destroy 80% of a fire and leave 20% of it. So entering Rafah is something that we absolutely have to do in order to achieve total victory. As for the humanitarian cost, I think the weight is simply we want to do things right. We want to go about this in order to achieve total victory and at the same time minimize any unintended damage to humanitarian civilians in the area. So I think, I can't comment exactly to why the weight. I think that question should be addressed to the IDF. But I think that as we've done throughout this war in Gaza, we do things methodically. They're all thought out, well planned out. And when it is time to enter Rafah, we will do so, and we will achieve total victory there. Thank you.
Thank you. A question from Dan Williams of Reuters. The founder of World Central Kitchen, Chief Jose Andres, told Reuters that he believes Israeli forces attacked the group's convoy in Gaza deliberately. What's your response?
As I said in the briefing, and as the members of our government has said yesterday, today, and immediately following this incident, this was an unintended strike, a mistaken identity, a case of mistaken identity. And as the findings become clear from the investigation, we will make them public. But this is a tragic incident that was never supposed to happen, and we will accept the findings of this investigation and we will adjust so this will not happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. A second question from Dan Williams of Reuters. In the wake of the airstrike on the WCK convoy, are IDF rules of engagement under review?
Thank you for the question. As I said, this incident was not supposed to happen. So clearly something went wrong here. And as we learn more and the investigation reveals exactly what happened and the cause of what happened, we will certainly adjust our practices in the future to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Jim Williams of Zenka International News Service, Washington, D.C. Also to do with the WCK investigation. This morning on NBC News, retired Admiral James D. Free Tuss, the former head of NATO and CENTCOM, said he has worked with the IDF for decades and it's not in their DNA to kill innocent people and certainly not humanitarian aid workers. That said, if it were me, I would put together an international military team to work with the IDF to get a truly independent report on what happened in the WCK incident. Is the Prime Minister open to an IDF independent report?
Thank you for the question. And certainly, I think what he said is absolutely true. It is not in our nature to do this. We have gone above and beyond, and this conflict will go down in the records as a conflict in which we have gone above and beyond in our efforts to safeguard humanitarian aid workers and civilians. Unintended casualties of war happen no matter what you do. And I think, like I said, once the results of the investigation become available, we will make those available to the public. And additionally, whatever the Prime Minister decides to do at that time will be up to him. I have nothing to add.
Thank you. Question from Hannah Julian of the Jewish Press. Israelis appeared to be gearing up for a major attack either from Hezbollah or Iran or both. Is there any assessment on whether this might actually take place, and if so, when?
Thank you for the question. I think in the last 6 months, we have seen an active Iran actively working to destabilize the region, whether that be through Hezbollah, through Hamas, or even through the Houthis. So there, in the last 6 months, has definitely been a move on the part of Iran to destabilize the region and to target Israel. Specifically related to troop numbers and readiness, I think that question should be directed to the IDF. I will say, as I said in the briefing, that Israel is ready and is always ready for any scenario to defend our people and to defend our borders. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Does Israel believe the US is pushing mass protests and new elections as a form of regime change, a color revolution in Israel?
Thank you for the question. Israel is a democracy. That means that if anyone wishes to protest anything at all, they have the right to do so peacefully. And I think last year we saw that for 6 months, people protested peacefully in the streets. Whatever your opinion is in a democracy, you're able to voice that. And I think, you know, like I said, we're a democracy, the US is a democracy, and protesting is a right of our citizens. I don't have any comments on what the US is doing.
Thank you. Another question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. In his statement on the World Central Kitchen deaths, President Joe Biden claimed that Israel has not done enough to protect aid workers trying to deliver desperately needed help to civilians. Israel has not done enough to protect civilians. The statement did not mention Hamas's role in stealing aid or using civilians as human shields. What is Israel's response?
Thank you for the question. I think we've seen over the course of this war, how the IDF has gone above and beyond to create humanitarian corridors, to, alert residents to move them out of harm's way, to create safe passages. There have also been pauses during the day so that humanitarian aid can get in, so that civilians can move from one point to the other. So I think, we've certainly done everything we can and continue to do everything we can to conduct this war in a manner that achieves our objectives as well as protects the innocent civilians of Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last question.
Thank you. Join us again Monday. Thank you all.